Hi, now let's look at interactivity, one of the pillars of a supercharged story time. Interactivity is the how of supporting learning, including early literacy, in our story times. You incorporate elements encouraging children to participate and interact with the content of your story time. This includes giving children opportunities and time to respond. You become more of a facilitator and less of a performer. Children learn best through interactivity, through their senses, and through the interactions they have with adults. We want to make sure that we sing, talk, read, write, and play with the participants in interactive ways. So let's look first at one aspect of interactivity, interactive reading. Here, we are looking at the ways we share books to keep children's attention, to encourage participation, and to help them understand what's happening in the book. Take a moment now to think about what you're already doing to be interactive as you share books with children in your story times. Pause the recording and write down your ideas in the learner guide for this topic. When you're done, you can resume the recording. I'm sure you came up with some great ideas. You may see them reflected in this interactive reading handout, which we're going to look at now. This handout is a summary that brings together information on interactive reading. Some books lend themselves more easily to interactive reading than others. Here are some characteristics of books that make interactive reading easier. So, for example, with clear storylines. By that I mean predictable stories for young children. And for young children, they might not be stories, but a predictable pattern, like brown bear, what do you see? Okay. For the preschoolers, we would have more sophisticated stories, but still a predictable and clear storyline helps with interactivity. You can just read down the rest of the bullets there, and at the bottom you'll see sensitive to diversity. By that I mean offering characters, situations, topics, and stories that both reflect and expand their world. This makes great opportunities for discussion. So let's look now at the features of interactive reading one by one. You can follow along on the handout. You wouldn't be using all these features in any one book at one sitting, and different books lend themselves to different features. We ourselves may feel more comfortable with one or another type of interactivity, and the size of the group may also make a difference. So keep in mind that having children listen to a story is also valuable, as it builds on their listening skills. Having them interact more builds speaking skills and develops comprehension. We'll start with reading with expression. Now, even though reading with expression, as opposed to using a monotone voice, doesn't necessarily make for interactive reading, it certainly helps children stay engaged. There are many ways to read with expression. If making voices for different characters feels forced or confusing, there are still other ways to read with expression. We can use the pause. You can vary the pace, going fast or slow, the pitch of your voice, high or low, and the volume, loud, soft. So now let's look at Chugga Chugga Choo Choo by Kevin Lewis as an example of how we might change the pace and the pitch of our voice from one page to another. The beginning of this book starts in the morning, and the pages are bright and yellow. So at the beginning, I would read in a kind of sprightly way. Sun's up, morning's here, up and at 'em, engineer. Hurry, hurry, load the freight, to the city, can't be late. Chugga, chugga, choo, choo, wheels a turning, woo, woo. Now when I come to this page with the train going through a dark tunnel, I might read a bit more slowly and lowly. Into tunnels, underground. See the darkness, hear the sound. Chugga, chugga, choo, choo. Echo calling. Woo, 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 woo. Our next feature in interactive reading is showing how books work. So you can be interactive while kind of playing around with the book. Be silly about how you orient the book, turning it upside down or backwards. Children love to say, "Oh no, you can't read the book like that." You can also run your finger under the title as you say the title of the book. Then have the children say the title of the book, and you run your finger under the words as they say them. You can talk about the author and the illustrator and ask the preschoolers what the author does and what the illustrator does. Next comes asking thoughtful questions. So here are some examples of open-ended questions, ones that cannot be answered with just yes or no. Of course, you wouldn't need to ask all these questions. These are just some examples. For the toddlers and twos who may not have as much expressive language, it's fine to ask these questions, wait a few seconds for their response, and then give your own response to them, reflecting what they might be thinking. Next, involving children in talking about the book. Well, we can do this in so many ways, like having them join in with a repeated phrase, allowing them to complete a rhyme or a phrase, and encouraging them to talk about the topic in a factual book. So, for example, with Chugga Chugga Choo Choo, I could say at the beginning of the book, in this book, the title is Chugga Chugga Choo Choo, the sound of the train on the tracks. And Chugga Chugga Choo Choo is repeated over and over again through this book. So let me hear you say those words, Chugga Chugga Choo Choo. Then they all join in and we say Chugga Chugga Choo Choo together. Oh, great. Then I'd like you to join in and say Chugga Chugga Choo Choo every time throughout the book. And then throughout the book, I'll give them a little hand signal and they'll join in with the words. I could also have them do the motion of round and round with their arms and elbows like the wheels in the train of the train. Okay, so we can practice that also at the beginning of the book, and when they join in with Chugga Choo Choo, they can join in with the motion as well. For those children who don't speak as much, they may just join in with the motion and not say the words, but it's a way to engage them in the book. And I could bring in a factual book for my next book and have them tell me what they know about trains. Here are some ways to develop vocabulary and comprehension as we read interactively. So using gestures, facial expressions, and movements to convey meaning as we read the book. Or you might actually explain a word. Having children make connections to their own experiences helps with their comprehension. So now that you've heard some examples, how do you think you would use these pages to develop vocabulary and comprehension? Pause the recording and write down your ideas in the learner guide for this topic. You can use the interactive reading handout as an aid. When you're done, resume the recording. Here are some of my ideas about what you could do with these pages. Keep in mind that you can read the whole book through and then come back to a page to be more interactive. You don't need to interrupt the story to support early literacy. So, to support vocabulary and comprehension, I could demonstrate echo with that woo-woo, woo-woo, right during the book. If I want to talk about what is an echo, then I might do that at the beginning of the book before I started or at the end of the book. and talk about what is an echo. It's a sound that comes back off the walls in a room or a cave or a tunnel, and it comes back more softly, and it reverberates or bounces off the sides of the walls. Or I might point to the man and say, who is this? This is the train driver or the train engineer, the train conductor, and I might introduce a couple of new words. I could ask, how do you think the boy is feeling? And it might be hard for them to see the picture, so I might put on a smiling face and hold my hands up high in the position that the little boy is in. And I might ask them, how do you think he's feeling? And they might say, happy. I say, yes, he looks very happy. Maybe he's being quite courageous in the dark tunnel. There are many ways we can extend the story, both within the story time setting or by offering ideas to parents and caregivers to do at home. And we may offer a handout to the parents with an extension activity that they can do at home. In the story time itself, we might offer a writing activity or have children repeat all of a story or part of it or have them retell a story. We could offer props or puppets or a flannel board and have them do some role playing. So there are lots of possibilities to extend a story, which helps develop their comprehension. So what about more than books? Let's look at some other ways we can be interactive in story time. There are lots of ways we can do this, be interactive in story times, from the quite simple to the more involved. So if you have a theme in your story time and you're introducing the theme, you might have the children tell you what they know about that topic. You might have a flannel board match where each child is coming up and putting a piece on the flannel board. You can have children act out a story or a rhyme. And you might offer a craft or activity experience. And of course, what we call process crafts or open-ended crafts are best. They allow for much more interactivity. Or you may not have a craft that they take home, but you might provide an activity or an experience that they're having at the library. Maybe playing with blocks or some exploratory play that gives them something to think about and talk about during the story time setting. And then one librarian has a word of the week, and they start out with that each week, a word to think about and talk about. So these are just some ways that we can be interactive in our story times. We're all interactive in story times to varying degrees and in different ways. Self-reflection is a part of assessment, one of the pillars of a supercharged story time. So here's an opportunity to try out self-reflection with interactivity. We'll take a closer look at the questions on the form in the next slide. You need not think of just one particular story time, but think of your story times in general. Think back on them and jot down your thoughts on each of these questions using the Interactivity Self-Reflection Worksheet. You'll notice that question 5 is on facilitating interactions between the adults and their children. We'll be going into this in more detail in a later module. For now, just think about things that you already do. So this concludes the presentation on interactivity. Thank you.